It's my turn already again. So I'm really excited about it. Yeah. Yeah, well, it's tough up here. You know, and I've been teaching forever. But usually, as a class situation, we're in a small room, we're sitting in a circle, you know, there's maybe 10 people, and it's a lot easier. But when you're up front, and then you're online too, it's like, eek, you know. But always get through it, and appreciate all your help, and we'll get through this together. But we've been looking at the last several, probably a few months, on David. And then Todd did a great job last week, and he handled some interesting stuff. And it seems, and what he mentioned too is, of course, you know, David's always mentioned as a man after God's own heart. And we saw David's rise, and, you know, the great warrior, man of faith, all the great things that he did. And then, like Todd mentioned last week, you know, now we're seeing the decline. So, you know, it's because of bad choices. So it's catching up with him in so many ways. This week, though, it's mostly about Absalom and his dealing with his dad, his father, the king, and so we'll be getting into that. It's in 2 Samuel 15. So, you know. 2 Samuel 15. Okay. Well, I'll go ahead and read that real quick. It's 37 verses, not too long. 2 Samuel 15. And the heading on my Bible, and I think most of them, it's Absalom's rebellion. So just think about that when we go through here and try and see the points, and we'll go over those, about his rebellion against his father, the king, and how he deals, as the king deals with him and everything. So, okay. After this, Absalom bought a chariot and horses, and he hired 50 bodyguards to run ahead of him. He got up early every morning and went out to the gate of the city. When people brought a case to the king for judgment, Absalom would ask, where in Israel were they from? And they would tell him their tribe. Then Absalom would say, you really got a good case, a strong case here. It's too bad the king doesn't have anyone to hear it. I wish I were the judge. Then everyone could bring their cases to me for judgment, and I would give them justice. When people tried to bow down before him, Absalom wouldn't let them. Instead, he took them by the hand and kissed them. Absalom did this with everyone who came to the king for judgment, and so he stole the hearts of all the people of Israel. After 4 years, Absalom said to the king, let me go to Hebron to offer a sacrifice to the Lord and fulfill a vow I made to him. For while your servant was at Geshur in Aram, I promised to sacrifice to the Lord in Hebron if he would bring me back to Jerusalem. All right, the king told him, go and fulfill your vow. So Absalom went to Hebron, but while he was there, he sent secret messengers to all the tribes of Israel to stir up a rebellion against the king. As soon as you hear the ram's horn, his message read, you are to say Absalom has been crowned king in Hebron. He took 200 men from Jerusalem with him as guests, but they knew nothing of his intentions. While Absalom was offering the sacrifices, he sent for Ahithophel, one of David's counselors who lived in Gilo. Soon many others also joined Absalom, and the conspiracy gained momentum. A messenger soon arrived in Jerusalem to tell David, all Israel has joined Absalom in a conspiracy against you. Then we must flee at once, or it will be too late. David urged his men, "Hurry, if we get out of the city before Absalom arrives, both we and the city of Jerusalem will be spared from disaster." "We are with you," his advisors replied. "Do what you think is best." So the king and all his household set out at once. He left no one behind except 10 of his concubines to look after the palace. The king and all his people set out on foot, and pausing at the last house to tell all the king's men moved past to lead the way. There were 600 men from Gath who had come with David along with the king's bodyguard. Then the king turned and said to Ittai, a leader of the men from Gath, "Why are you coming with us? Go on back to King Absalom, for you are a guest in Israel, a foreigner in exile. You arrived only recently, and should I force you today to wander with us? I don't even know where we will go. Go on back and take your kinsman with you, and may the Lord show you his unfailing love and faithfulness." But Ittai said to the king, "I vow by the Lord and by your own life that I will go wherever my lord the king goes, no matter what happens, whether it means life or death." David replied, "All right, come with us." So Ittai, all his men, and their families went along. Everyone cried loudly as the king and his followers passed by. They crossed the Kidron Valley and then went out toward the wilderness. Zadok and the Levites also came along carrying the Ark of the Covenant of God. They set down the Ark of God, and Abiathar offered sacrifices until everyone had passed out of the city. Then the king instructed Zadok to take the Ark of God back into the city. "If the Lord sees fit," David said, "he will bring me back to see the Ark and the tabernacle again. But if he is through with me, then let him do what seems to be best." The king also told Zadok the priest, "Look, here is my plan. You and Abiathar should return quietly to the city with your son Ahimaaz and Abiathar's son Jonathan. I will stop at the shallows of the Jordan River and wait there for a report from you." So Zadok and Abiathar took the Ark of God back to the city and stayed there. David walked up the road to the Mount of Olives, weeping as he went. His head was covered and his feet were bare as a sign of mourning. And the people who were with him covered their heads and wept as they climbed the hill. When someone told David his advisor Ahithophel was now backing Absalom, David prayed, "O Lord, let Ahithophel give Absalom foolish advice." When David reached the summit of the Mount of Olives where people worship God, Hushai the Archite was waiting there for him. Hushai had torn his clothing and put dirt on his head as a sign of mourning, but David told him, "If you go with me, you will only be a burden. Return to Jerusalem and tell Absalom, I will now be your advisor, O king, just as I was your father's advisor in the past. Then you can frustrate the counter Ahithophel's advice. Zadok and Abiathar, the priests, will be there. Tell them about the plans being made in the king's palace, and they will send their sons, Ahimaaz and Jonathan, to tell me what is going on." So David's friend Hushai returned to Jerusalem, getting there just as Absalom arrived. Okay, so there's a lot in there. We're not going to dissect it verse by verse. We'll get all the highlights out of it. Did everybody notice about all the things going on from Absalom? And I know most of you know the story real well, but I've got some few questions here, and then we'll just develop it a little bit further. But how did Absalom steal away the hearts of people of Israel from David? So this is Absalom's rebellion. So how did he go about doing this? Pretending he cared? Okay. But, yeah. Yeah. I know that's why I read one of the commentaries. It's like, oh yeah, politician. So he was, he was in it for him. He wanted King David's position. So he was trying all these different things, trying to get, take the kingdom away from David. In some of the cases, the commentaries say that he kind of felt, since he was kind of the next in line, Solomon was still little yet, but he was the oldest. He felt that this was going to be his, because of the way, the kings came about, through family. But, of course, as we've seen before, we'll see, that's not God's plan. So, but anyway, he tried. He went out. Okay. He told them he could not meet with them, nor, let's see, what were some ways? He presented himself with, at the beginning, a chariot and horses, and hired 50 bodyguards to run ahead of him. So what would you think? Was it for his protection? What do you think when you see a processional like that? You got a brand new chariot. He's got 50 men, with horses riding in front of him. Did you see anything? Huh? He's what? He's pimping out. Yeah, important person. But yeah, he's trying to. Yeah, he thinks he's really important, and he wants other people to know that. So yeah, he's trying to prove that, hey, look at me, I'm it. David, not so much anymore. I'm going to be in here, and so then he works on the people. So where does he stand every day? At the gate. So the city of Jerusalem, it's all walls. I think they had several gates, but anyway, there was a couple of gates. But anyway, he was at a gate, and then the people would pass by and come up to him, and what would he ask them? Yep. Who are you from? Where are you from? Who are you? Where are you from? What's your case? What's your issue? And then what did he tell the people?
You got a good case.
Yeah. Right before that, what do you say about David?
Nobody's there to see him.
Nobody's to help you. I'm here to help you. So he won in favor of everybody that would come up to the gate. So here he impressed them with the horses, the guards, his chariots. Look at me, David's too busy, or he doesn't have anybody to represent you folks, everybody out here. So I'm going to do that for you. I'm going to take care of that. He acted as judge. He took care. What did he do to show? Because they would bow, most people would bow down before the king. They would do that, but he said, what did he do in response? Yeah. Right. Yeah. Look, I really care about you. Don't bow down in front of me. And he lifted up and then kissed him. And I think it's, the two kiss or whatever. But anyway, just think about that. If you went in front of a judge or somebody, or somebody really important, what would you do? I mean, what's your natural? I hate to say the leader of our country because that's, we won't go there. But anyway, but somebody really important. What's your first reactions? Yeah, respect. Yeah, and I know this is part, this is kind of a side note, but anybody that's watched Saturday Night Live many, many years ago, when it was kind of clean, they had the Wayans brothers, Wayne's World on there, and they'd have some guests come in, and they would bow down and say, I'm not worthy, and that's the same thing. We're not, you got to show them respect. And however that is, so they would bow down back then, but he would lift them up and then kiss them. So, I mean, just think how many people he'd win that way. So, he's for the people, but he's really not. Okay, so he stole their hearts. Name a place where Absalom organized his conspiracy. What city, town? We have one nearby. Yeah, Hebron. Yeah, I think back then they said Hebron, but yeah. So Hebron here is not that much of a city, but back then, I mean, apparently it was big, and he was become a king over that area. Okay. Okay. Alrighty. What were his plans to overthrow David's kingdom? So remember, he wants David's throne. He wants to be king of Jerusalem. So what was his plans to overthrow David? Yeah. Yeah.
And I was kind of confused about this, but my understanding is what he was trying to do is he was trying to make it look like he had become king and make people confused
Mm-hmm.
by saying, to tell everybody that he was, so he's like, oh, he became king now. And is that what he was trying to do?
Yeah, right. Well, that's the whole thing. So through this whole chapter, he's being deceitful in so many ways. So yes, he was pretending that he'd already pretty much become king. Because I mean, it was his ultimate goal. But yeah, he was working he was trying to underline everything that David was doing, or who David was, and everything. Okay. So that under verses 9 through 12. He said, all right, the king told him, go and fulfill your vow. Absalom went to Hebron, but while he was there, he sent secret messengers to all the tribes of Israel to stir up a rebellion against the king. As soon as you hear the ram's horn, his message read, you are to say Absalom has been crowned king in Hebron. And he took 200 men from Jerusalem with his guests, and they knew nothing of his intentions. While Absalom was offering the sacrifices, he sent for Ahithophel, one of David's counselors who lived in Gilo. Soon many others joined Absalom, and the conspiracy gained momentum. So here he was, he's being very deceitful. He's really trying to undermine David and his kingdom. Okay. So the followers of Absalom were great, small. We just read that. Yeah. Okay, well, he had at least 200 men, and then many more were starting to follow him. And his conspiracy gained momentum. Okay. Okay. Why did David flee from his house why did David flee Jerusalem with his household? What was his motive? What was his reason for leaving Jerusalem? Which I think is kind of interesting because remember David, I mean, he's a mighty warrior, he's king. What does he do? He runs. Right. Okay, that was one thing. He's not a coward, and by no means, but okay, so he flees the city. What was the other reason? He wasn't really afraid for his life, I don't think, but he was a little bit, I think. But he said, because he said that Absalom became mighty, a lot more powerful, and I think he was kind of afraid a little bit. But then what was the other reason why he fled? Save the city. Yeah. 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 Yep. Yep. So yeah, again, we mentioned earlier, and like I said, Todd brought up last week, and David's not dealing with his family well. He's made some poor choices anyway, but then his children made poor choices, and he's not dealing with them well. And then, but yeah, he flee the city, but he wants to spare the city. He doesn't want to be destroyed. Okay. Okay, so I thought, I thought that was interesting too about, David's reaction. But I think, it's all part of the plan and everything works out. I mean, you'll see, but, it's interesting at the same time because here he's king, and then, again, it was just a temporary moment for him to for this. But so what? Okay, another interesting. Who stayed behind in the palace? Okay, so what's a concubine? Service, yeah. What was their purpose? Or what would be a modern day, what would you think of as a concubine? It's a mistress. He had, how many wives did he have? I mean, he had tons of wives, plus he had concubines, there in the palace also. I mean, this, poor David, I mean, I can't even imagine, dealing with that many women, but. Yeah. Yeah. They wouldn't be able to get out quick enough. Yeah. But again, that's another thing, another, issue with David and his personal life. So that did not help him out any either. But yeah, he left 10 concubines to stay back at the palace to take care of things. Okay. When David fled Jerusalem, he had the ark and the ark of God and the priest. Did he leave them behind or take them with him?
He took them with him until the
Right. Yeah, he did both. They started to leave the city, and then he told them to go back. Go back to the city. So they took the ark and all the priests, they went back to Jerusalem. And, okay. Yeah, so Zodak and the Levites, they returned back to the city. And then David was still waiting. He said, if the Lord sees fit, he will bring him back to the city. But if not, the Lord will do what's best. So so David still was following God. I mean, he still, was trying to make some good choices. And that's the whole thing they've got here on the outline is on giving control of my life to God. So he's been making so many bad choices. He continues, but he still wants to follow God. And that's his, and that was his statement that, he's just going to turn it over to him. Whatever his will is, that's what's best for me. Okay. Yeah. Right. Yeah, we do that today, like careers, where we live, worship or whatever, it's just like, turn it over to God and then he'll direct your lives. Good. Okay, what was David's prayer to God concerning Ahithophel, his counselor who had joined Absalom? So this is, Ahithophel was a counselor with David for a long time. They were very close. And then, so what was his advice?
That he gave, well, David's prayer was that he gives sacrifice.
Yeah, yeah. And I know my version says foolish advice. So then it would fall back on him and things would go south for him.
Real fast. I kind of want to,
Yeah.
I had a thought about the concubines that I wanted to say. I wonder if this shows kind of like what James was saying, that he isn't as genuine as it seems. Like I almost wonder if this is more of David not wanting to deal with his kids' problems than David scared for the city. David kind of goes, oh my goodness, he's going to come at us really fast and we'll be surprised, so we should run so that the city's safe. And what his servants say to him is, well, we'll do whatever you want us to. And kind of what I get out of that is, why? But, I mean, maybe I'm wrong. And so I'm kind of wondering if that's what's going on. And then what's funny is, what did he leave the concubines for? He leaves them to keep the house, right? Which is like, we're all going to die, but don't let the house fall apart.
Uh-huh.
See it? And I wonder if that's kind of what this is showing, is that David is just trying to avoid dealing with Absalom more than that he's actually scared for the city.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, I was just curious
Mm-hmm.
what you guys thought. That was what I was thinking.
Like, the reason I think I was expecting, the reason why he wanted to leave the city is because, obviously, Absalom had been politicking really, really well.
That could be.
And David was smart enough to realize that probably if the battle was at the city, that it would split the city, and the city would turn on itself. So moving the battle away from the city was his way to save the city. That's my opinion. That I can put it on face, but
No,
that's
but
how I would.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. Well, it said he really had great concerns over the city. He didn't want to be destroyed. Okay, good. Okay, and then where did David go? It's in verse 3. So he told Yep. Yep. So in verse 30, David walked up the road to the Mount of Olives, weeping as he went. His head was covered and his feet were bare, a sign of mourning. And the people who were with him covered their heads and wept as they climbed up the hill. When someone told David that his advisor Ahithophel was now backing Absalom, David prayed, "O Lord, let Ahithophel give Absalom foolish advice." When David reached the summit of the Mount of Olives where people worship God, Hushai the Archite was waiting there for him. And Hushai had torn his clothing and put dirt on his head, a sign of mourning. And then, but then he goes on to tell, go ahead and return back to Jerusalem. And so David tries to turn things back on Absalom. But what's unique about going up the Mount of Olives? What about who went up the Mount of Olives later, weeping and yeah. Thought that was very interesting that, of course, David went up, he was weeping for his sins, but then Jesus went up weeping for everybody's sins because he had no sin. So I thought that was a really good point in the scriptures there. Okay. Well, anything else on this? So then we find out, things are going to happen next week in the next chapter 16. And then I think David kind of regroups a little bit. And then I think things start to turn south for Absalom. But through this whole thing, I was looking at the deceit that Absalom was doing, trying to get David's kingdom and trying to be in power for himself. I found a couple of scriptures that were dealing with this pretty well. One was Proverbs 12, and Let me read that real quick. We got a little bit of time. Proverbs 12. And then, these are, I love Proverbs and all, and just short to the point, tell you, this is the way things are and this is how you should act. But to learn, you must have discipline. It is stupid to hate correction. The Lord approves of those who are good, but he condemns those who plan wickedness. Wickedness never brings stability, but the godly have deep roots. A worthy wife is a crown for her husband, but a disgraceful woman is like cancer in his bones. The plans of the godly are just, the advice of the wicked is treacherous. The words of the wicked are like a murderous ambush, but the words of the godly save lives. The wicked die and disappear, but the family of godly saints, stands firm. Better to be an ordinary person with a servant than to be self-important but have no food. The godly care for their animals, but the wicked always are cruel. A hard worker has plenty of food, but a person who chases fantasies has no sense. Thieves are jealous of each other's loots, but the godly are well rooted and bear their own fruit. The wicked are trapped by their own words, but the godly escape such trouble. Wise words bring many benefits, and hard word brings rewards. Fools think their own way is right, but the wise listen to others. A fool is quick-tempered, but a wise person stays calm when insulted. An honest witness tells the truth, a false witness tells lies. Some people make cutting remarks, but the words of the wise bring healing. Truthful words stand the test of time, but lies are soon exposed. Deceit fills hearts that are plotting evil. Joy fills hearts that are planning peace. No harm comes to the godly, but the wicked have their fill of trouble. The Lord detests lying lips, but he delights in those who tell the truth. The wise don't make a show of knowledge, but fools broadcast their foolishness. Work hard and become a leader. Be lazy and become a slave. Worry weights a person down. An encouraging word cheers a person up. The godly give good advice to their friends. The wicked lead them astray. The lazy people don't even cook the game they catch, but the diligent make use of everything they find. The way of the godly leads to life. The path does not lead to death. Okay. I thought that was very appropriate because we've always seen of Absalom, and what happens to him, but also, we can see that nowadays. Anybody that, I don't know if anybody's ever dealt with somebody that, I remember I had a friend in school and he would always tell stories. You never know when he was telling the truth. That's, do I believe this or not? And then, and I'm sure you may know somebody like that too. But, we need to be truthful. We need to work hard. We need to be fair. Be patient. We need to be all those things. Also, we got like 2 minutes. 2 Timothy 2, 2 Timothy 3, 12 through 17. Okay. Yes, and everyone who wants to live a godly life in Christ Jesus will suffer persecution, but evil people and impostors will flourish. They will deceive others and will themselves be deceived. But you must remain faithful to the things you have been taught. You know they are true, for you know you can trust those who taught you. You have been taught the Holy Scriptures from childhood, and they have given you the wisdom to receive the salvation that comes by trusting in Christ Jesus. All Scripture is inspired by God and is useful to teach us what is true and to make us realize what is wrong in our lives. It corrects us when we are wrong and teaches us to do what is right. God uses it to prepare and equip his people to do every good work. Okay, so anything else on chapter 15? Okay, all righty, well, we're about done. So thanks, and have a good week. Okay.